Crimson Dawn, Rise of the Shadow Wolf. A world ravaged by the undead faces a new, terrifying threat. An alpha werewolf, commanding an army of undead hybrids, unleashes a reign of terror, transforming humans into its own kind. Amidst the chaos, Captain Sarah Knox and a band of survivors fight desperately for a glimmer of hope. Rumors of a safe haven where vampires protect humans spark a perilous journey in search of sanctuary. As alliances shift and enemies grow stronger, humanity teeters on the brink of extinction. Dive into this gripping saga where survival hangs in the balance, and the line between savior and destroyer blurs in the shadow of the Alpha's howl. Crimson Dawn, Rise of the Shadow Wolf, a tale of resilience, terror, and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. Chapter 1. The Mutation. The final stand at the camp was a scene of desperation and chaos. As the undead swarmed over the last defenses, the sage, the eldest and wisest of the ancient beings, made a fateful decision. His form expanded into a massive shadow, soaring upwards before crashing back to Earth with a force that rippled through the night. As the shadow wave surged outward, every undead it touched fell lifeless, their corrupt animation extinguished. Meanwhile, on the fringes of the camp, a lone werewolf, a remnant of another age, fought fiercely against the undead horde. Its form was a terrifying spectacle, massive and feral, yet it was overwhelmed by the sheer number of attackers. As it fought, the werewolf suffered numerous bites, its body beginning to undergo a horrific transformation, a merging of the undead curse with its own primal nature. Just as the werewolf started to succumb to the zombie virus, the sage's sacrificial shadow wave reached the outskirts. The dark energy, designed to purge the undead curse, swept over the battlefield. When it collided with the transforming werewolf, an unforeseen reaction occurred. The shadow energy, instead of purging the virus, disrupted the transformation process, creating something entirely new, a mutant undead werewolf. Its body, caught between states, became a grotesque fusion of zombie and beast. The creature's eyes glowed with an unnatural light as it rose, larger and more menacing than before. With a guttural, otherworldly howl that echoed through the night, the zombie werewolf stood as a testament to the unintended consequences of the sage's sacrifice. The shadow energy, meant to be a final act of salvation, had inadvertently given birth to a new kind of horror. As the survivors gathered around the fallen sage, mourning their savior, they remained unaware of the new creature birthed at the edge of their sanctuary. The chapter closed with the zombie werewolf disappearing into the dark, its howl a chilling portent of the dangers still lurking in the world. Chapter 2. The Alpha's Call. The hybrid werewolf, a monstrous amalgamation of undead and beast, roamed the devastated landscape. Its new form rendered it immune to the undead's attacks, a lone predator in a world overrun by zombies. As it traveled through the decaying remnants of civilization, it encountered a group of the undead. The ensuing battle was swift and brutal. The hybrid moved with a ferocity that was unmatched, tearing through the zombies with ease. Its bites were lethal, yet it remained unaffected by the virus, a unique creature in this apocalyptic world. As the hybrid continued its aimless wander, it stumbled upon a sight that stopped it in its tracks. In a clearing stood the original werewolf, an alpha, massive and imposing, its presence exuding power and authority. Accompanying the alpha were three smaller werewolves, each formidable in their own right. The alpha, with piercing eyes and an aura of ancient wisdom, regarded the hybrid with a curious intensity. It was a creature of intelligence and instinct, fierce and terrifying in its majesty. The hybrid, sensing the significance of this encounter, felt an inexplicable bond forming. The alpha werewolf represented the origin of its cursed bloodline, a connection that ran deep through every werewolf. As the alpha approached, the hybrid felt a surge of recognition and reverence. It bowed its head in servitude, acknowledging the alpha as its leader. The alpha, accepting this gesture, let out a low, commanding howl, a call that resonated with primal authority. The chapter concluded with the 5 werewolves, the alpha, its companions, and the newly inducted hybrid uniting as a pack. With a newfound sense of purpose, they raced off into the night, their forms blending into the shadows. The howls of the pack echoed across the land, a haunting melody that signaled the rise of a new force. In the world of Crimson Dawn, rise of the Shadow Wolf. This unlikely union of beast and undead heralded a new chapter in the saga, where the lines between hunter and hunted were forever blurred. Chapter 3. The Impenetrable Sanctuary. Miles from the roaming paths of the hybrid werewolf, nestled in a valley surrounded by steep hills, lay a well-fortified human camp. This sanctuary, known as Haven, was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience in the face of the apocalypse. As a group of zombies shuffled towards its walls, the defenders dispatched them with practiced ease, their defenses holding strong against the relentless tide of the undead. The main characters of Haven were a diverse group, each with their own story of survival and loss. There was Captain Sarah Knox, the leader of the camp, known for her strategic mind and unwavering determination. Beside her stood Dr. Liam Chen, the camp's medical expert, whose knowledge of science and medicine had been crucial in fortifying their defenses. Maya, a young engineer, was the creative genius behind many of the camp's innovative protective measures. As they watched the defeated zombies from the safety of their walls, Sarah remarked, "I've heard rumors of a group of survivors who allied with vampires. They say those creatures can easily kill the undead." Maya nodded, her eyes thoughtful. Having allies like that wouldn't hurt, she mused. But look at what we've built here. Our sanctuary is impenetrable. Dr. Chen chimed in, explaining the details of their defenses. Our walls are reinforced with steel and concrete, standing 12 feet high, with electrified barriers at the top. We have watchtowers at strategic points, equipped with long-range weapons. The only entry is through a heavily guarded gate with multiple security checks. The surrounding area is cleared, Sarah added. No trees or high structures that could be used to gain access. We've dug deep trenches filled with spikes and traps. Motion sensors and surveillance cameras cover every possible approach. It's not just the physical barriers. We've created a multi-layered defense system. As the chapter concluded, the inhabitants of Haven went about their daily routines, secure in the knowledge that the camp was a bastion of safety in a world overrun by the undead. The rumors of the Vampire Alliance lingered in their conversations, a curious blend of skepticism and intrigue. Yet, as night fell over Haven, its people rested easy, confident in the strength of their fortress, unaware of the new, unforeseen threats that roamed the world outside their impenetrable walls. Chapter 4. The Howl and the Horde. The tranquility of Haven was abruptly shattered when a lookout shouted an urgent warning. "Incoming attack! Look there on the hill!" The scene shifted to a pack of wolves in the distance, silhouetted against the hillside. There were approximately 10 of them, an ominous sight against the setting sun. Through binoculars, the Haven guards noticed something unsettling. The wolves stood on 2 legs, their postures eerily humanoid. One, significantly larger and more imposing, dominated the pack. The others, though fearsome, bore the grotesque marks of decay, a chilling blend of werewolf and zombie. Captain Sarah Knox approached the lookout, taking the binoculars to see for herself. As she watched, the wolf pack began advancing toward Haven. Just then, a small horde of zombies, drawn by the commotion, appeared in the pack's path. "This should be interesting," she muttered, expecting a clash between the two monstrous forces. However, what unfolded next defied their expectations. The hybrid werewolves, seemingly unnoticed by the undead, launched into a vicious assault. They moved with terrifying efficiency, their claws and teeth rending through the zombie horde. The sight of the undead werewolves tearing through their zombie counterparts was both horrific and mesmerizing. Within minutes, the entire horde lay decimated, the ground littered with lifeless bodies. The alpha werewolf let out a victorious howl, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of Haven's defenders. Amidst the carnage, two of the fallen zombies began to convulse violently. Their bodies, recently infected with the virus and still coursing with the lycanthropic curse, underwent a grotesque transformation, reshaping into new, undead werewolf hybrids. The chapter delved into the explanation behind this selective transformation. Out of the numerous undead cut down and bitten, only these two had the unique combination of a recent zombie infection and the lingering werewolf curse in their veins. The contact with the undead werewolf's infectious essence acted as a catalyst, igniting the latent lycanthropic curse and giving rise to two new monstrosities. As the chapter concluded, the defenders of Haven watched in stunned silence, realizing that the threat they faced had evolved into something far more dangerous and unpredictable. The sight of the newly transformed undead werewolves joining the pack sent a clear message. The rules of survival in this apocalyptic world were changing, and new, terrifying creatures were emerging from the shadows. Chapter 5. The Siege of Haven. Panic seized Haven as the reality of their new threat sank in. Members of the camp, their faces etched with terror, turned to Captain Sarah Knox. "What are we going to do?" they cried. "Those things are unstoppable." From the lookout point, a guard's voice cut through the chaos. "They're leaving," he shouted. The defenders watched, tense and alert, as the wolf pack, now bolstered by two more undead werewolves, disappeared behind the hill. Maya, the camp's engineer, stepped forward with determination. "We need to reinforce our defenses. What can kill a werewolf? Silver, right? Do we have any?" "No," Sarah responded grimly. "Then we need to seriously reinforce the camp. It's already impenetrable to zombies. We need to make it the same for those things." The camp sprang into action, working fervently to strengthen their defenses. Hours later, the guard's voice once again rang out in alarm. "They're back!" The pack was visible again on the hill, but this time the Alpha began to approach Haven alone, its massive form exuding menace and power. The rest of the pack remained stationary on the hill. The Alpha's presence sent waves of fear through the camp. It was a terrifying sight, huge, muscular, with sharp claws and teeth, and an aura of pure evil. As it stood before Haven's gates, the Alpha let out a bone-chilling howl. "Hit it with everything we've got," Captain Knox ordered. The camp unleashed a barrage of gunfire and explosives, but the beast seemed unaffected. "Impossible!" they exclaimed in disbelief. Unhindered, the Alpha began to tear through the defenses, shredding through metal and concrete as if they were paper. In no time, it was inside the camp, wreaking havoc. Anyone who crossed its path was mercilessly killed, only to rise again moments later as newly turned werewolves, the lycanthropic curse transforming them. In the midst of the carnage, Captain Knox and a handful of survivors took a last stand against the beast and its rapidly growing pack. Death seemed certain as they faced the unstoppable force, but then, inexplicably, the Alpha ceased its assault. With a commanding howl, it led its newly transformed pack, now numbering over 50, back towards the hill to join the rest of the pack. The chapter ended with the survivors of Haven in stunned silence, surrounded by the remnants of their once impregnable sanctuary. The night echoed with the distant howls of the retreating werewolves, a haunting reminder of the new, formidable enemy that had risen from the shadows. The world of Crimson Dawn, Rise of the Shadow Wolf, had evolved into something far more perilous, where even the strongest defenses could fall before the might of the shadow-infused lycanthropes. Chapter 6. The Twisted Transformation. On the desolate hill, under the cold gaze of the moon, the newly transformed werewolves gathered. The Alpha, towering above them all, emitted a low growl, a command that resonated with an ancient, primal authority. The pack responded, the freshly turned werewolves instinctively lining up in an eerie formation. As they stood, the undead werewolf hybrids, creatures of a grotesque fusion of decay and primal ferocity, advanced towards the line. Their movements were disjointed yet purposeful, their eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. One by one, they approached the newly turned werewolves, each encounter a harrowing spectacle. The scene that unfolded was one of chilling transformation. The undead werewolves sank their decayed teeth into the flesh of the new werewolves. Their bites were deliberate, a corrupting infusion that spread through the victims' bodies. The freshly turned werewolves convulsed violently, their howls of agony piercing the night as they fell to the ground. The ground became a tableau of transformation. The bodies of the fallen werewolves writhed as if in the throes of a nightmarish metamorphosis. Their muscles contorted, bones cracked and reformed, fur melded with decaying flesh. The air was filled with the sounds of snapping sinews and the sickened squelch of mutating flesh. One by one, they rose again, their forms now twisted into the abomination of the undead werewolf hybrids. Their eyes, once bright with newfound lycanthropic power, now glowed with a sinister, deathly light. They were no longer creatures of the night. They were monstrosities born of shadow and decay, an unholy union of the undead curse and the werewolf's curse. The Alpha watched the entire process with an unfathomable expression, its presence exuding a cold, commanding aura. This ritualistic transformation was more than a mere turning. It was an initiation into a new, terrifying existence. As the chapter closed, the hill was silent, save for the low growls and snarls of the undead werewolf hybrids. They stood, a formidable pack united under the Alpha's dominion, a new terror unleashed upon the world. In the darkness, their combined howls echoed, a sinister symphony that foretold a new era of horror in the unfolding saga. Days after the chilling transformation on the hill, a vast and unending horde of the undead moved across the countryside. It was a mindless sea of decay, swelling in numbers as it shuffled through the ravaged lands. This relentless tide of zombies, too numerous to count, mindlessly advanced, driven by their ceaseless hunger. Anything that caught their attention was inevitably consumed by their overwhelming mass. In their path stood a formidable assembly of undead werewolves, approximately 60 in number, under the command of the imposing Alpha. With a fierce snarl, a command more felt than heard, the Alpha signaled the undead wolves to engage the massive horde. The Alpha observed as his pack launched into the fray. The scene that unfolded was a macabre spectacle of destruction. The undead werewolves tore through the zombie horde with savage efficiency, their strength and ferocity far surpassing the shambling undead. It was a violent, chaotic clash, akin to a mighty wave eroding the shore as the zombies fell one after another to the raw power of the undead werewolves. Hours of relentless carnage later, the once formidable horde lay decimated, a landscape of dismembered and lifeless bodies. Yet, unlike previous encounters, no new hybrids rose from the fallen. The lycanthropic curse, it seemed, had run its course in the transformed zombies. The Alpha surveyed the scene with a glimmer of anger in its malevolent eyes. The Alpha's purpose was singular: to grow its pack by any means necessary. With the realization that the undead could no longer be turned into werewolf hybrids, the Alpha's focus shifted. Human camps, once mere survivors in this apocalypse, now represented the only means to bolster its ranks. With a menacing howl that reverberated through the bones of the undead werewolves, the Alpha commanded its pack to disperse, to scour the land for humans. The werewolves moved out, each taking a different direction, their forms blending into the night as they embarked on their grim search. The chapter closed with the Alpha standing alone on the battlefield, its howl echoing into the distance, a chilling declaration of its intent. The story of Crimson Dawn, Rise of the Shadow Wolf, took a darker turn, the fate of humanity now hanging in the balance as the Alpha sought to expand its nightmarish legion. Chapter 7. The Island Refuge and the Unlikely Saviour. In a serene contrast to the chaos of the mainland, a small group of survivors had found solace on a secluded island in the middle of a tranquil lake. They had constructed a humble but efficient refuge, complete with fishing traps, a small farm, and a makeshift ferry for quick trips to the mainland. This oasis of safety stood as a testament to human adaptability and resilience. Two members of this island sanctuary, Jake and Elise, embarked on a scavenging mission to a nearby town. They navigated through the deserted streets, entering a local chemist and various stores in search of medicine and additional supplies. As they moved through the aisles of a grocery store, Elise accidentally knocked over a display, the clatter echoing through the silent town like a beacon to the undead. Within moments, a large group of zombies, drawn by the noise, converged on their location. Jake and Elise hurried into a nearby building, barricading saw the door behind them. The undead banged against the barrier, their relentless moans filling the air. The door began to splinter under the assault, the situation growing increasingly desperate. Suddenly, a chilling howl cut through the noise. Peering out through a crack in the barricade, Jake and Elise witnessed an unbelievable sight. An undead werewolf, its form both majestic and horrifying, was attacking the zombies. It moved with lethal grace, each swipe of its claws and bite of its teeth bringing down one undead after another. After a brief but intense skirmish, the werewolf had cleared the area of zombies. It then turned its attention to the building where Jake and Elise were hiding. With little effort, it pried open the weakened door. The survivors braced themselves for the end. Unexpectedly, the werewolf snarled and backed away, allowing them a path to escape. In a mix of shock and relief, Jake and Elise seized the opportunity, rushing back to their ferry and returning to the safety of their island. Once back, they recounted their harrowing experience to the others. "It saved our lives," Elise said in disbelief. "That creature was our savior." Meanwhile, from the shores of the mainland, the eyes of the undead werewolf that had saved them surveyed the island refuge. Its gaze lingered for a moment before it turned and disappeared into the wilderness, heading back to report to the Alpha. The chapter closed on a note of unease and mystery. The actions of the undead werewolf had saved Jake and Elise, but the motive behind this mercy remained unknown. The survivors on the island were left to wonder about the true nature of these fearsome creatures and what the future might hold for their small haven in a world overrun by shadows. Chapter 8. Unlikely allies and divergent beliefs. Days had passed since the undead werewolves began their reconnaissance missions. One by one, they returned to the alpha werewolf, their silent gestures communicating the discovery of human encampments. The alpha, its features exuding a sense of grim contentment, readied itself for an imminent assault on the human survivors. Across the calm waters of the lake, a voice shattered the peace of the island refuge. "Hello," shouted Captain Sarah Knox, standing at the water's edge with Maya and 2 other survivors from Haven. "We need help," they called out desperately. The islanders peered across the lake, wary and cautious. "Who are you? Are you infected?" they called back. "No, but we need help," replied Captain Knox. After a moment of deliberation, 2 islanders set off on the ferry to meet the newcomers. On the shore, the islanders met Captain Knox and her group. The captain quickly explained their dire situation. Their camp had been overrun by an alpha werewolf and its pack. The islanders examined them carefully for any signs of infection before inviting them onto the ferry to discuss further. Once on the island, Jake and Elise shared their extraordinary encounter with the undead werewolf that had saved them from certain death. "We're sure they're friendly," Elise said, recalling the werewolf's unexpected mercy. Captain Knox interjected with a starkly different perspective. "There's an alpha," she explained, "one that's turning humans into part of its pack. It's not friendly, it's amassing an army." The revelation sparked a wave of fear and confusion among the islanders. Some were inclined to believe Jake and Elise's account of the werewolf's unexpected benevolence, clinging to the hope that these creatures could be allies. Others, however, were swayed by Captain Knox's warning of the Alpha's sinister intentions, feeling the threat of an impending attack. The island, once a haven of safety and unity, was now divided by differing beliefs. While some saw the werewolves as potential saviors, others viewed them as a looming threat to their existence. The chapter closed on a tense note, with the island community grappling with this newfound uncertainty and the question of whom to trust in a world where friend and foe were no longer clearly defined. Chapter 9. The Alpha's Assault. In the main cabin of the island refuge, Captain Sarah Knox sat in deep conversation with the island's leader, a resourceful woman named Rebecca. They discussed the swirling rumors of a distant settlement, rumored to be shielded by powerful vampires, possessing advanced defenses and weaponry. Perhaps they could offer help, Rebecca pondered, skepticism in her voice. But it might only be a myth. Their discussion was abruptly interrupted by a howl, deep and resonating, emanating from the lakeside. They rushed outside, along with the other islanders, to see the shore swarming with undead werewolves. Among them, a figure stood out starkly, the Alpha, its towering form exuding raw power, ancient malevolence etched into every line of its body. "That's the one," Captain Knox whispered, a mix of fear and recognition in her eyes. "The werewolf that destroyed Haven." The Alpha began its approach towards the island, walking with eerie calmness across the lake bed, its form emerging ominously from the water onto the island's shore. Panic erupted among the islanders as they scrambled to defend their haven. The ensuing battle was a desperate struggle for survival. The islanders fought valiantly against the Alpha, but their efforts were futile against such an unstoppable force. It rampaged through the refuge, its claws and teeth rending through any defense put in its path. Amidst the chaos, Captain Knox, realizing the futility of their fight, made a silent decision. She, along with Maya and another companion, slipped away, swimming quietly from the back of the island. Behind them, the sounds of destruction and terror continued to escalate. As they swam further away, they dared to look back. The island that had once been a symbol of hope and safety was now engulfed in flames, its inhabitants transformed into werewolves under the Alpha's curse. The Alpha itself stood amidst the destruction, a conqueror watching over its new domain. Captain Knox and her companions swam on in silence, each stroke taking them further away from the nightmare behind them. The chapter closed with the haunting image of the Alpha werewolf, its howls echoing across the lake, proclaiming the fall of another bastion of humanity. The survivors faced a stark reality. In this new world, dominated by shadows and terror, nowhere was truly safe. Chapter 10. The Quest for Sanctuary. Exhausted and grief-stricken, Captain Sarah Knox and her small group reached the safety of a distant shoreline. They collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, the horror of the island's fall still vivid in their minds. As they sat, regaining their strength, Captain Knox's resolve hardened. "We have to find this camp, this community protected by vampires," she asserted, her voice tinged with a mix of desperation and determination. "It truly is our only hope of survival." The scene shifted to the rumored sanctuary, a place where the reality seemed as unbelievable as the tales that surrounded it. The camp, nestled in a secluded valley, was a haven where humans and vampires coexisted. The elders, ancient, enigmatic vampires, watched over the human survivors with an air of solemn responsibility. In this unique community, an atmosphere of cautious harmony prevailed. Humans went about their daily tasks under the protective gaze of the elders, who in turn maintained a vigilant watch against external threats. The alliance, born out of necessity in a world overrun by darkness, stood as a beacon of hope in a landscape ravaged by fear and despair. As the chapter and the story drew to a close, the focus returned to Captain Knox and her companions. They set off on their journey, a quest fueled by the faint hope of finding refuge in a world where humanity was relentlessly hunted. Their path was uncertain, and the dangers they would face unknown, but their determination to survive burned brightly against the backdrop of a world consumed by shadows. The final words of the chapter hinted at the continuation of this harrowing tale. Crimson Dawn, Rise of the Shadow Wolf, would return, promising more twists and turns in a saga where the lines between savior and destroyer, human and monster, were forever blurred. End of Part 1, Crimson Dawn, Rise of the Shadow Wolf. Part 2, coming soon. In Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, a world teetering on the edge of oblivion faces new, formidable threats. As humans and their vampire allies fortify their defenses with silver, a sinister evolution unfolds. Undead werewolves, immune to shadow powers, prowl the land, led by a powerful alpha. Meanwhile, in the shadows, an intelligent zombie, a master of necromantic sciences, crafts grotesque, undead abominations, heralding a new era of horror. Three factions converge in an imminent clash of wills and strengths, where survival is the ultimate prize. Dive into this chilling saga, where alliances are tested, enemies evolve, and the fight for existence becomes more desperate than ever. Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising. A tale of resilience, terror, and the unyielding fight against the darkness. Chapter 1. The Shadow and the Wolf. In the secure vampire-protected camp, a sense of cautious prosperity had begun to take root. Survivors worked alongside their unlikely protectors, crafting a semblance of normalcy in a world that had long forgotten the meaning of the word. Alex, now a prominent figure in the camp, engaged in a deep conversation with Varric and Alara, two of the elder vampires. Their discussion centered around unsettling rumors brought by new arrivals, tales of a new breed of werewolf, immune to the zombie virus, terrorizing the remnants of humanity. Alex listened intently, his brow furrowed in concern. "What do you know about these creatures?" he asked. Varric, his ageless eyes reflecting centuries of knowledge, spoke with a tone of caution. "In the past, many an elder has fallen to a lichen. They are ferocious, driven by an instinct of pure rage. We generally avoid them. Our shadow forms have never affected lichens. In physical form, they could easily tear us apart." Alara added, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But we have no idea about undead lichens. Perhaps our shadow form might affect them, or it could potentially strengthen them. It's a risk we haven't faced before." The camp, despite these alarming discussions, continued to thrive under the protection of the elders. New arrivals came daily, each bringing skills, stories, and sometimes warnings. The community expanded, building more shelters, organizing food supplies, and strengthening their defenses. Among the newcomers, a singular message echoed fear of an alpha wolf, leading an army of undead werewolves. It was said to be an unstoppable force, leaving only destruction in its wake. As the chapter concluded, the camp settled into the night, a community bonded by survival against the darkness outside. The elders, vigilant and watchful, pondered the implications of this new threat. The tale of Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, had begun, promising a struggle not only against the undead, but against a force of nature that was both ancient and terrifyingly new. Chapter 2. Preparing for the unknown. In the vampire-protected camp, months had passed without a single zombie attack, a development that was welcomed with cautious optimism. The dwindling signs of the virus gave the survivors a much-needed opportunity to strengthen their community. The camp had transformed into a self-sufficient haven. Fields of crops spread across what used to be barren land, an efficient irrigation system keeping them watered. Hot water systems were rigged up, and electric generators hummed in the background, a sign of the progress they had made. With farms, renewable energy sources, and reinforced defenses, the camp was a beacon of hope in the post-apocalyptic wilderness. Elena, the camp leader, was in deep conversation with Alex about plans for expansion when a sudden commotion interrupted them. Rushing to the source, they found a scout group that had just returned from a neighboring city. The scouts' faces were etched with fear. "We saw something terrifying," one scout reported breathlessly. "3 wolf-like creatures, their skin hanging off as if dead, but they were moving, prowling. It's just a 2-day walk from here." Gathering with the elders, they relayed the scouts' findings. There was an air of grim determination as they discussed potential defenses against werewolves. "We have ways to stop ordinary lichens," Varric said, "but we're unsure about these undead variants." 2 of the elders, Morella and Reese, left and returned hours later with a large, ancient chest. With a dramatic thud, they placed it on the ground. The chest burst open, spilling a hoard of silver coins. "We can smelt these," Alara suggested, "turning them into weapons and defenses, projectiles, spears, fortified barriers." The camp's engineer, a young woman named Lucy, stepped forward with ideas. We can create silver-tipped arrows and bullets, maybe even coat some of our walls and fences with silver. The camp sprang into action, fueled by the urgent need to prepare for a possible attack. Smelting stations were set up, and the once valuable coins were melted down and refashioned into various weapons and defense mechanisms. Lucy took charge of designing the new armaments, ensuring every piece had a touch of silver. As the chapter closed, the camp was a hive of activity, every survivor contributing to fortifying their sanctuary against the looming threat. The fear of the unknown hung heavily in the air, but so did a sense of unity and purpose. The story of Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, was evolving into a tale of not just survival, but resilience and ingenuity in the face of the darkest threats. Chapter 3. In the desolate expanse of an abandoned city, 3 undead werewolves prowled the streets, their senses sharp and focused. They moved through the silent buildings and empty shopping centres with a predatory grace, their noses twitching as they followed a faint scent. The trail, however, soon became muddled, lost amidst a mass of undead bodies that littered the streets, their decaying scent overpowering any other trace. Suddenly, a distant howl pierced the stillness of the city, a call for assistance. The 3 undead werewolves, responding to the urgent summons, raced through the urban jungle. Their movements were swift and unhampered, the obstacles of the city nothing more than mere nuisances in their path. As they neared the source of the howl, they came upon a ferocious scene. 5 of their undead kin were locked in battle against a horde of zombies. Normally, such a fight would be quickly won by the werewolves, but this time, something was different. The zombies fought back with unusual strength and resilience, indicating a disturbing development. One of the werewolf pack members, despite its undead nature, had been grievously injured, rendering it incapable of continuing the fight effectively. The zombies' relentless onslaught showed signs of evolution, a terrifying adaptation in their quest for survival. With the arrival of the 3 reinforcements, the tides of battle shifted. The combined strength of the 8 undead werewolves quickly overwhelmed the remaining zombies, dispatching them with brutal efficiency. As the last of the zombies fell, the pack united once more, resuming their search for human settlements. They re-entered the city, determined to pick up the scent trail they had lost. The chapter took a moment to delve into the implications of this new development. The zombie virus was mutating, giving rise to zombies that were stronger and alarmingly displaying signs of increased intelligence. This evolution suggested the potential for unique mutations, zombies that were not only more robust but also more cunning, posing an even greater threat to the survivors. As the undead werewolves disappeared into the shadows of the city, the chapter closed with a sense of foreboding. The world of Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, was changing, the lines between predator and prey blurring further as each side adapted in their relentless struggle for survival. Chapter 4. The Siege of the Alpha's Kingdom. In a city now ruled by the undead, the Alpha Werewolf had established a dominion unlike any other. His kingdom, a conquered city, had been transformed into a fortress for his burgeoning pack. Hundreds of undead werewolves patrolled the streets, guarding every entrance with vigilant eyes. The pack, now a formidable force, welcomed back a scout party, leading a group of 12 human survivors from a distant camp. These unfortunate souls, captured and brought to the Alpha's kingdom, were presented before the towering, fearsome leader. As the humans pleaded for mercy, the Alpha moved among them with swift, merciless efficiency. With each bite, the humans collapsed, only to convulse violently and rise again as lichens, the newest recruits to his expanding army. An undead werewolf approached. ready to initiate the transformation into undead hybrids, but the Alpha issued a primal snarl, a command to halt. These 12 would remain as pure lichens, untouched by the curse of undeath. Just as a sense of calm settled over the kingdom, chaos erupted. The unthinkable happened. The Alpha's fortress was under attack. A large horde of zombies, led by 2 grotesquely mutated zombies, besieged the kingdom. These mutations were giants among their kind, wielding massive, makeshift weapons, their strikes crushing the undead werewolves beneath their immense power. The mutated zombies fought with a terrifying intelligence, commanding the hundreds of smaller, but equally mutated undead in a strategic assault. The Alpha, witnessing the threat, let out a thunderous roar. In response, the undead werewolves turned even more feral and bestial, their attacks reaching a frenzied, berserker-like intensity. A brutal, bloody battle ensued, with significant losses on both sides. Eventually, the sheer ferocity of the undead werewolves turned the tide, leading to their hard-fought victory. In the aftermath, the Alpha examined the remains of the 2 mutated zombies. Sniffing and inspecting the body parts, the Alpha seemed to contemplate the evolution of their enemy. The virus, it appeared, was undergoing a rapid mutation, accelerating thousands of years in evolutionary terms. It was adapting, becoming stronger and smarter, in a bid to avoid extinction. The Alpha stood amidst the battlefield, surrounded by the fallen. The world of Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, was entering a new phase, where the virus itself was becoming a more formidable adversary, forcing every creature, undead or alive, to adapt or perish in this never-ending dance of survival. Chapter 5. Fortifications and Sacrifices. In the fortified camp, Elena and Alex, along with a group of camp members, surveyed their defenses with a sense of cautious pride. "These fortifications should hold up against any Lycan attack," Elena remarked, observing the reinforced walls and newly installed defense mechanisms. Varric and Alara joined them, bringing news that added a layer of gravity to the conversation. "The virus is evolving," Varric shared, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "All life, when facing extinction, will fight to survive. This evolution could give rise to larger, more dangerous undead." Alex let out a dry laugh. "Great. Undead werewolves and now mutated zombies. Just keeps getting better, doesn't it?" Alara nodded thoughtfully. "Our shadow energy remains effective against the virus, but its impact on lichens is uncertain. It's almost like a game of rock, paper, scissors with these evolving threats." As night fell, the camp prepared for the feeding ritual, the necessary sacrifice for the Elders' protection. Camp members lined up, a mix of resignation and understanding on their faces. One by one, the Elders bit into their necks, drawing just enough blood to sustain them. The sight was unsettling, reminding everyone of the parasitic nature of this arrangement. Some had suggested blood donations, or storing blood in cups to ease the discomfort of the process, but the Elders had explained the necessity of lifeblood drawn directly from a living, beating heart. "This is the price of our survival," Alara whispered, her eyes reflecting a somber acknowledgement of the grim reality. The chapter closed on a poignant note, highlighting the complex relationship between the camp members and the Elders. The camp, while growing and strengthening, was bound to the Elders by a bond that was both protective and parasitic. In the world of Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, survival came at a cost, and every day was a reminder of the delicate balance between life and the shadow of death. Chapter 6. Arrival of the Wounded. At the camp's entrance, Captain Sarah Knox and her 2 companions stood weary but determined. After a thorough check for bites, or any signs of the virus, they were allowed inside. Captain Knox and her companion, Emma, were quickly ushered to meet with the main members of the camp, and Varric. Captain Knox recounted the harrowing events at Haven and the island, detailing the futility of their defenses against the alpha werewolf. "It was like facing a force of nature," she said, her voice heavy with the memory. "This alpha werewolf, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. Its power was unnatural. Its strength left everything it touched in ruins." She explained how the undead werewolves seemed to act as scouts. Once they find a camp, it's not long before the alpha arrives, and when he does, he's unstoppable. The camp leaders listened intently, their faces etched with concern. "We've reinforced the camp with silver spikes," Elena said, gesturing towards the fortifications. "And we've even developed a silver powder that lingers in the air. It should make contact with a lichen without us having to get near them." Captain Knox looked intrigued. "I thought silver also affected vampires," she commented. Varric responded with a slight wry smile. "First off, we do not like being called vampires. We are simply elders. And no, silver does not affect us. In fact, I am quite fond of it." As the chapter closed, a sense of mutual understanding and respect settled among the group. Despite the daunting threat posed by the alpha werewolf, the camp's innovative defenses and the elders' wisdom offered a glimmer of hope. Yet the question lingered. Would it be enough to withstand the ferocity of the alpha and its pack? The story of Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, continued, with the survivors bracing for what may come, armed with knowledge, determination, and a newfound alliance. Chapter 7. The Ambush Plan. Urgency filled the air as scouts rushed back to camp with a critical report. "A group of undead werewolves has been spotted," one scout announced, breathless from the haste. "They're just minutes away, and it looks like they've picked up a trail." Elena, the camp leader, quickly grasped the gravity of the situation. "If they report back to the Alpha, we'll have a full-scale assault on our hands," she stated. "We need to take out this group before they can return." The scouts confirmed there were 7 undead werewolves in the approaching party. The camp immediately sprang into action, gathering their specially crafted weapons. Silver arrows and the few silver bullets made from the remnants of their gunpowder supply were distributed among the fighters. Additionally, they readied silver dust grenades and shields with silver-coated spikes. "We need to ambush them before they spot our camp," Elena instructed. "If even one gets back to the Alpha, it's over for us." With the elders in their resting state, unable to assist until nightfall, the burden of the ambush fell on the human members of the camp. Alex, taking charge of the group, began to orchestrate the ambush. Captain Knox, driven by a desire for retribution, volunteered to join. "I want some payback," she declared. Equipped and ready, the group, including Captain Knox, quietly made their way to the planned ambush spot. The tension was palpable as they set up their positions, lying in wait for the undead lichens. The chapter closed on this scene of anticipation, the camp's fate hanging in the balance. They waited, weapons at the ready, for the imminent arrival of the undead werewolves. In Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, every moment was a fight for survival, and this ambush was a desperate attempt to tip the scales in their favor. Chapter 8. The Clash in the Woods. Concealed within the trees and positioned downwind, the ambush team held their breath as the undead werewolves neared their trap. Tense moments passed until the first glimpse of the ghastly pack came into view. "Get ready," Alex whispered, his eyes fixed on the approaching threat. The werewolves moved cautiously, their noses twitching as they sniffed the air. One of them paused, seemingly catching a whiff of the hidden team. "Now!" Alex commanded. In unison, the team hurled their makeshift silver grenades. As the devices exploded upon impact, a cloud of fine silver particles burst into the air, enveloping the werewolves. The effect was immediate and devastating. The creatures writhed in excruciating pain, the silver dust burning their undead flesh. A flurry of silver-coated arrows and projectiles from slingshots followed, striking with deadly precision. 3 of the werewolves staggered and fell under the relentless assault. The remaining 4, despite their agony, lunged towards the source of the attack, driven by primal rage. The team raised their shields, bracing for impact. As the werewolves' claws struck the silver-laden barriers, they howled in pain, the metal searing their skin. Captain Knox, her determination unwavering, thrust a silver-tipped spear into one of the werewolves. Its cry of torment echoed through the woods before it collapsed. One by one, the rest of the werewolves met similar fates, but as the team neutralized the threat, one injured werewolf began to flee. Alex, with a steady hand, drew his bow and released an arrow in a perfect arc. The werewolf tumbled to the ground, ensuring that no survivors could report back to the Alpha. As the team regrouped, a sense of triumph mixed with relief filled the air. "Well, we know silver works, so we got an edge," Alex said, a hint of a smile on his face. Captain Knox looked back at the fallen werewolves, a sense of vindication in her eyes. "That felt good," she said. "This one's for all of Haven." The group made their way back to camp, their victory a reason for celebration. The camp greeted them with cheers, the success of the ambush providing a much-needed morale boost. As the chapter closed, the survivors shared stories and laughter around a bonfire, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had an effective weapon against their formidable enemy. In Crimson Dawn, new moon rising, each small victory brought hope, and hope was the fuel that kept their fight for survival burning. Chapter 9, The Gathering Storm. As darkness enveloped the camp, Varric, the Elder, carefully examined the bodies of the fallen undead werewolves. His findings were of crucial importance. Returning to the camp leader, he shared his assessment. "It is my estimation that our shadow forms are ineffective against these undead lichens. I sense they are created through a similar shadow energy to our own, rendering them immune to our powers. We can assist you against the undead, but not these creatures." Alex and Elena, the camp leader, absorbed this news with a mix of disappointment and resolve. "Well, silver seems to work well," Alex responded. "We'll devise new methods of defense using silver. We'll be ready." Meanwhile, the wounded undead werewolf from the earlier battle against the zombies limped painfully among its fallen pack members. It gazed towards the camp from a distance before beginning its slow journey back to the Alpha's kingdom, carrying crucial information about the humans' defenses. Miles away, in a city overrun by the undead, a unique figure stood amidst the chaos. This zombie, evolved far beyond its kin, observed the decaying metropolis with an almost contemplative gaze. It retreated to its lair, a place of grotesque experiments and macabre creations. Inside the lair, various experiments bubbled and simmered. Creatures were sewn together to form larger, more formidable undead. Regular zombies were subjected to chemical processes, altering their appearance and intelligence. This evolved undead creature, possessing a level of intelligence previously unseen, operated with a knowledge akin to necromancy. It seemed to understand a different type of science and biology, manipulating life and death to its sinister will. As the chapter concluded, the stage was set for an epic encounter. Three factions stood on the brink of a monumental clash. The humans, with their vampire allies, fortified and armed with silver. The werewolves and their undead pack, led by the formidable Alpha. And now the zombies, evolving under the guidance of their intelligent, necromantic leader. The next chapter of Crimson Dawn, New Moon Rising, promised to be a collision of forces, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, in a battle that would shape the fate of this ravaged world. The epic tale was set to continue, with survival hanging in the balance for all. Crimson Dawn, The Last Alchemist, a world ravaged by supernatural forces, faces a new era of terror. Witness the rise of the necromancer, Dr. Stephen Lestat, a genius-turned-undead mastermind, as he commands an army of grotesque undead mutations against the fearsome alpha werewolf and its legion. Amidst this chaos, the Human-Vampire Alliance, armed with ancient knowledge and modern tactics, struggles to survive, dive into a tale where science meets dark magic, where battles rage between reanimated abominations and undead beasts, and where the thin line between life and death is blurred. Crimson Dawn, The Last Alchemist, a gripping saga where every choice could either spell doom or offer a glimmer of hope in a world engulfed by the shadows of war. Chapter 1. The Necromancer's Experiment. In the ghostly silence of an abandoned city, a figure moved through the ruins with purpose. The Necromancer, a being transformed by the zombie virus into an entity of dark intelligence, walked among the fallen bodies of countless undead. These remnants were the casualties of brutal clashes between vampires, werewolves, and their own kind. He inspected the lifeless forms with a clinical eye, selecting parts with meticulous care. As he gathered the chosen pieces, a crude cart, pulled by two hulking zombies, rumbled into view. The necromancer nodded, and the zombie drivers coated the collected body parts with a greenish, viscous substance. The liquid seemed organic, yet unnatural, pulsing with an eerie luminescence. Stepping back, the necromancer observed the transformation that began to unfold. The coated bodies convulsed violently, then started to rise again. The scene that followed was both horrific and fascinating. Some of the bodies began merging, creating grotesque amalgamations of flesh and bone, larger and more formidable than any typical undead. Others sprouted additional limbs, transforming into spider-like creatures that scuttled away with surprising agility. A few stood apart, their eyes flickering with a newfound awareness, suggesting a heightened level of intelligence. These beings looked around, taking in their surroundings with a sense of purpose and understanding. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile crossed the necromancer's lips, a disturbing sign of satisfaction. Turning away from the grotesque spectacle, he began his journey back to his lair, a stronghold filled with dark experiments and forbidden knowledge. The chapter closed with the necromancer's silhouette disappearing into the distance, leaving behind the newly risen abominations to roam the desolate city. This opening to Crimson Dawn, The Last Alchemist, set the stage for a tale of unspeakable horrors and the relentless pursuit of forbidden powers, blurring the lines between life, death, and something far more sinister. Chapter 2. The Genesis of the Necromancer. Years before the world succumbed to chaos, Dr. Stephen Lestat, a renowned biologist specializing in evolutionary genetics, worked tirelessly in his laboratory. His research delved deep into the mysteries of genetic manipulation and the evolutionary principles that governed life. He explored the boundaries of DNA sequencing, gene splicing, and the potential for altering the very essence of living organisms. As cities began to fall under the shadow of the werewolf curse, Dr. Lestat was summoned for his expertise. Tasked with finding a cure for the lichen affliction, he plunged into intensive research. His discoveries, however, led to a troubling conclusion. The curse could not be cured, only altered. He developed a virus, a genetic concoction that, when introduced to a werewolf system through a bite, would transform the werewolf into a shambling zombie. This discovery sparked intense debate among his team. Dr. Lestat, aware of the potential consequences, argued vehemently against its use, fearing it would unleash further catastrophe upon humanity. Amidst the turmoil, Dr. Lestat's laboratory was abandoned as the werewolf onslaught overwhelmed human defenses. He was evacuated to a secure military base, but refused to continue his work on the virus, adamant that it should not be unleashed. However, fate took a grim turn when the virus was released into the world, spreading uncontrollably. Within days, it reached the military base where Dr. Lestat resided. In a cruel twist of fate, he was bitten, but rather than succumbing to a mindless undead state, he retained his consciousness. The transformation into the undead necromancer could be attributed to his intimate involvement with the creation and handling of the virus. Over time, Dr. Lestat's intelligence not only persisted, but grew in a direction dominated by death and decay. His undead form fostered a fascination with necromancy, while his knowledge of genetics and biology twisted into something dark and unnatural. As the chapter closed, a flashback showed Dr. Lestat in his human form, a man dedicated to science and understanding, slowly transforming into the figure now known as the Necromancer. His visage morphed, reflecting the grim reality of his new existence, a twisted version of his former self, a being at the intersection of life, death, and the darkest realms of scientific possibility. Chapter 3. The Father of the Damned. In the heart of the undead city, the figure of Dr. Stephen Lestat, now the Necromancer, stood atop a crumbling building, gazing over his vast Priest and macabre kingdom. His transformation had not only altered his form, but also his perspective towards the legions of the undead that roamed the streets below. To him, these creatures were more than mindless entities. They were his flock, his children, birthed from the chaos he inadvertently helped unleash. The Necromancer felt a deep, paternal empathy towards his undead creations. By creating the virus, he had become their progenitor, a father figure in their grotesque existence. This sense of responsibility drove him to continue his work in evolving and enhancing his undead horde. He saw potential in each twisted form, each aberration, viewing them as works of art in a gallery of the macabre. The loss inflicted upon his creations by the Alpha and its undead werewolves had not gone unnoticed. Many of his undead had fallen prey to the ferocious pack, culled brutally from his legion. This act had kindled a burning desire for retribution within the Necromancer. He was preparing to fight back against the Alpha, to reclaim his dominion over death from the encroaching shadow of the werewolf curse. Standing amidst the ruins, the Necromancer raised his arms, addressing the thousands of undead before him. His voice, a chilling echo of his former human self, resonated with authority and dark purpose. He spoke of retribution, of reclaiming the night from the claws of the Alpha. He spoke of an assault to end the werewolf reign, to restore the balance of power in this new world order. As the chapter drew to a close, the scene was set for a monumental confrontation. The Necromancer, with his vast army of undead, readied themselves for a battle that would echo through the annals of this dark era. Crimson Dawn, the last alchemist, was building towards a crescendo of conflict, where the very essence of life and death hung in the balance. The necromancer's undead city, once a silent testament to ruin, now buzzed with the anticipation of war, a war to end the reign of the Alpha. Chapter 4. The Gathering Storm. In the heart of the Alpha's kingdom, an air of urgency permeated the atmosphere as a group of undead werewolf scouts returned. In a guttural, unearthly language, understood only by their kind, they relayed urgent news of a formidable undead army, amassing in strength and numbers under the command of the necromancer. Upon hearing this, the Alpha let out a terrifying roar that echoed through the ruins, a sound that stirred the undead werewolves into frenzied action. The Alpha, massive and imposing, began to lead its pack out of the city. Hundreds of undead werewolves raced alongside, a fearsome wave of death ready to wash over any who dared oppose them. Meanwhile, the ground shook with the advance of the necromancer's undead army. Monstrous abominations, their forms a twisted mockery of life, pulled carts filled with vats of a mysterious green liquid. Smaller zombies trudged alongside, their numbers vast and unyielding. Among them, spider-like creatures darted forward, their speed and agility a nightmarish sight. At the rear of the horde, a group of undead, draped in tattered robes, moved with an eerie sense of purpose. Their intelligent gaze betrayed a level of awareness far beyond that of typical zombies, and at the center of this macabre procession, the necromancer himself, a figure of deathly command. The undead army moved inexorably towards the Alpha's kingdom, driven by a thirst for vengeance. The necromancer, with a cold, calculating gaze, led the march, his mind set on retribution for the fallen undead. Simultaneously, the undead werewolves, with the Alpha at the forefront, closed the distance towards the necromancer's legion. Moving with terrifying speed, they tore across the countryside, their primal roars filling the air. The Alpha, surrounded by its pure werewolf guardians, prepared for an epic confrontation. The chapter closed on this impending clash, setting the stage for a battle that would shake the foundations of the post-apocalyptic world. Two unstoppable forces, each led by a being of immense power, were about to collide in a cataclysmic showdown. Crimson Dawn, the last alchemist, was moving towards a climax that promised to be both brutal and unforgettable, a clash of undead and beast like none other. Chapter 5. In the shadow of war, in the relative safety of the human camp, a sense of unease permeated the air as scouts rushed back with alarming news. Elena, the camp leader, and Alex, now her second in command, gathered with a sense of urgency to receive the report. The scout, visibly shaken, detailed the massive movement of undead forces. "We saw grotesque abominations, larger than any creature has a right to be, pulling carts filled with ominous substances," he recounted. Spider-like zombies, fast and agile, skittered around, and among them, zombies with an air of intelligence. It was like nothing we've ever seen. That night, under a tension-filled sky, Alex, Elena, and the elders convened to discuss the implications of this sighting. Varric and Alara listened intently, their age-old wisdom a crucial asset in these uncertain times. "It's clear something monumental is unfolding," Alex said, his face etched with concern. "We need to be prepared in case this army decides to turn its attention towards us." Alara nodded gravely. "We must fortify our defenses further. Our shadow abilities have limitations, especially against these evolved undead creatures. Varric added, "It's not just physical defenses we need. We must consider strategic locations, escape routes, and perhaps even alliances. This is no ordinary enemy. This is an army with purpose and intelligence." Elena, considering their options, spoke up. "Let's focus on reinforcing our perimeter with more silver-based weaponry. We also need to establish watch posts with clear lines of sight. If these creatures can plan, we must be one step ahead." The meeting continued deep into the night, with discussions revolving around tactics, defense strategies, and potential evacuation plans. The sense of impending conflict hung heavily over the camp as they contemplated their next moves. As the chapter drew to a close, the human camp, bathed in the pale moonlight, was a hub of activity. Everyone, from the youngest to the eldest, contributed to the preparations. In Crimson Dawn, the last alchemist, the spectre of war loomed large, and the camp braced itself for what might come next, caught in the crossfire of a battle between unimaginable forces. Chapter 6. The Clash of the Titans. The undead werewolf army halted, their snarls filling the air as they surveyed the advancing zombie army. At the forefront, the alpha werewolf stepped forward, its presence commanding and fearsome. With a roar that echoed through the barren landscape, it signaled the charge. Over 100 undead werewolves, fueled by primal rage, surged forward towards the mass of zombies. The zombies, numbering over 1,000, detached from the main army to meet the werewolves' onslaught. The ensuing battle was savage and brutal. The undead werewolves, with their superior strength and agility, tore through the zombie ranks with ease. Within minutes, the field was littered with the remains of the vanquished zombies, while the werewolves stood unscathed. The Alpha let out a triumphant roar, a signal that was met with deafening responses from its pack. The werewolves reveled in their victory, unaware of the new danger brewing behind them. From the midst of the main zombie army, a barrage of glass vats, filled with the greenish liquid, arced through the air, landing amidst the fallen zombies. The undead werewolves, engaged in battle with the front line of the main zombie horde, failed to notice the transformation happening behind them. As the green liquid seeped into the bodies of the fallen zombies, they began to convulse and reform. Monstrous abominations and mutated zombies, more powerful and grotesque than before, rose from the dead. The front line of undead werewolves, now caught between the advancing zombie army and the newly risen mutants, faced a dire situation. Amidst the chaos, the Alpha sensed the turn of the tide. With a piercing howl, it commanded an all-out assault. The entire pack of undead werewolves, fueled by a mix of fury and desperation, charged mercilessly towards the zombie army. The battle that ensued was catastrophic. The werewolves fought valiantly, but the zombies, bolstered by their newly mutated kin, were relentless. The sound of werewolf cries gradually gave way to an eerie silence as the zombie army continued its advance. In the aftermath, a few hundred zombies gathered around the fallen werewolves. Once more, the greenish substance was poured over the corpses. The werewolves' bodies began to meld with the undead, forming horrific hybrids of zombie and wolf, some with multiple limbs, others with 2 heads, and a few merging into hulking monstrosities. The Alpha, witnessing the desecration of its pack, let out a furious, mournful howl. It signaled the remaining werewolves for a final, desperate charge against the overwhelming zombie force. Crimson Dawn, the last alchemist, had reached a pivotal moment, a battle of epic proportions, where the outcome would reshape the balance of power in this nightmarish world. Chapter 7. Retreat and Regroup. The battlefield, a tableau of carnage and chaos, bore witness to the relentless clash between the undead werewolves and the ever-evolving zombie army. Amidst the turmoil, the Alpha issued a low, commanding grunt to one of its pure werewolves. With a swift, calculated move, the chosen werewolf darted into the heart of the melee, its paw deliberately dipping into a pool of the greenish goo before swiftly retreating to the Alpha's side. With a powerful roar that resonated with authority and urgency, the Alpha signaled the remaining undead werewolves to fall back. Their numbers had dwindled under the relentless assault of the mutated zombies, and the Alpha's strategic decision to withdraw was marked by a palpable sense of loss. From his vantage point, Dr. Stephen Lestat, the necromancer, observed the unfolding events with a cold, satisfied grin. For the first time, he sensed the tide turning in his favor, envisioning a future where the Lycan threat could be subdued once and for all. The Alpha and its diminished pack made a strategic retreat, heading back towards their kingdom with heavy hearts. Their pace was hastened by the need to regroup and reassess their strategy in the face of this newfound adversary. Meanwhile, Dr. Lestat's undead army, emboldened by their success in the battle, regrouped with a newfound sense of purpose. The grotesque and mutated soldiers, along with the intelligent zombies, began a steady march towards the Alpha's kingdom. Their advance was methodical and relentless, a moving wall of death poised to engulf what remained of the werewolf dominion. The chapter closed with the two forces, the Alpha's retreating werewolves and the necromancer's advancing undead army, moving towards an inevitable showdown. The balance of power in the world of Crimson Dawn, the last alchemist, was shifting, and the impending conflict between these formidable factions promised to be both brutal and decisive. Chapter 8. The Unfolding Crisis. Back at the human camp, the air was thick with apprehension as fresh reports came in from the scouts. They had witnessed the fierce battle between the undead werewolves and Dr. Lestat's zombie army, including the retreat of the Alpha and its pack. Gathered around a makeshift table, the scouts relayed their observations to Elena, Alex, and the elders. The werewolf threat, particularly the Alpha, has always been our primary concern, Alex began, his voice laced with a hint of relief. But this development, it changes everything. Elena nodded, her expression grave. We're still unsure how our shadow powers will affect these new mutated zombies, she said, but we believe they should still be effective against them. The conversation then shifted to the mysterious greenish goo described by the scouts. It seems to reanimate and transform both the undead and the fallen werewolves, one scout explained, the horror of the scene still vivid in his mind. Varric and Alara exchanged a look of deep concern. This is a dire development, Varric said gravely. It means that even in defeat, the undead can utilize this substance to continually replenish and evolve their ranks. Alara added, it's more than just a battle against a relentless enemy. This goo represents a tool for endless resurrection and transformation. It could potentially change the nature of this war. The camp leaders and the elders pondered this new information. The revelation about the greenish goo added an alarming dimension to the conflict, suggesting that their battles against the undead might be far from over, even with apparent victories. As the meeting concluded, a palpable sense of urgency enveloped the camp. Plans were quickly made to gather more intelligence on this green substance and to reinforce their defenses in preparation for any potential threats. The chapter ended with the camp bracing itself for the challenges ahead, aware that the fight for survival had entered a new, more complex phase in Crimson Dawn, the Last Alchemist. Chapter 9. The Fall of the Kingdom. The Alpha and its remaining pack, weary and diminished, returned to their kingdom, a place that once symbolized their dominion over the land. There, they were met by an injured undead wolf, the sole survivor of a scout group. In a language composed of growls and snarls known only to their kind, it conveyed the existence of the human camp, where the undead werewolves had been defeated. Enraged by this news and sensing the shifting balance of power, the Alpha lashed out in a fit of fury, slashing at the injured scout, silencing it forever. Its eyes then fell upon the werewolf with the greenish goo on its paw. With a dominant grunt, the Alpha commanded the werewolf to lick the substance. The effect was immediate and startling. The pure werewolf convulsed violently, its form expanding and contorting. It grew in size, its muscles bulging, and a feral intensity took over its features, making it appear more monstrous and untamed than ever before. The Alpha, observing this transformation, let out a resounding howl, acknowledging the newfound strength within its pack. Days later, as the undead army, led by the necromancer, approached the Alpha's kingdom, the stage was set for a brutal confrontation. The remaining undead werewolves, loyal to their leader, positioned themselves to defend their territory. The zombie army, unyielding and relentless, launched its assault without hesitation. The battle that ensued was fierce and unmerciful. The undead werewolves fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. The grotesque abominations, spider-like zombies, and the intelligent undead of the necromancer's army overwhelmed them. The sounds of the clash were guttural and chilling, echoing the desperation of the werewolves' last stand. As the dust settled and the screams faded, the undead army emerged victorious. The kingdom lay in ruins, the defenders defeated, but amidst the carnage, the necromancer's minions made a startling discovery. The Alpha and its pure werewolves were nowhere to be found. The chapter closed on this eerie note, leaving the fate of the Alpha and its elite pack shrouded in mystery. Had they fallen in the battle, or had they escaped to fight another day? The story of Crimson Dawn, the Last Alchemist, continued, weaving a tale of shifting power, survival, and the endless cycle of conflict in a world consumed by darkness and chaos. Chapter 10. Shadow Reconnaissance. On the outskirts of the fallen kingdom, a figure stood, enveloped in darkness. Varric, the Elder, was a mere shadow against the backdrop of devastation. His eyes, ancient and discerning, scanned the aftermath of the battle, analyzing the enemy's capabilities with a strategist's mind. Utilizing his ability to move unseen in the shadows, Varric glided effortlessly among the ranks of the undead army. He moved silently, gathering crucial intelligence on their numbers, behavior, and the extent of their mutations. His presence went unnoticed, a ghost amidst the chaos. As he prepared to depart, a large, hulking abomination caught his eye. The creature stood sentry outside the city, pushing a cart that appeared to be laden with the mysterious greenish goo. Curiosity piqued, Varric murmured to himself, "Let's try this." Approaching the creature from the shadows, he passed through it in his shadow form. To his satisfaction, the abomination collapsed instantly, lifeless and still. "Well, at least this still works," Varric noted, a hint of relief in his voice. With swift, silent movements, Varric returned to the camp, darting from shadow to shadow, a wraith in the night. Upon arrival, he sought out Elena and Alex to deliver his report. Gathered in the command tent, Varric relayed his findings. The undead army is vast and varied in its monstrosities. However, our shadow powers remain effective against them. This knowledge could be pivotal in our strategy, he concluded. Elena and Alex absorbed the information, their minds racing with the implications. The revelation that the Elder's powers could still turn the tide against certain undead foes offered a glimmer of hope in an otherwise grim outlook. As the chapter drew to a close, the camp braced itself for the challenges ahead. The knowledge Varric brought back was invaluable, yet the future remained fraught with danger and uncertainty. Crimson Dawn, The Last Alchemist, was poised to continue its narrative arc, promising more intrigue, conflict, and survival against insurmountable odds. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey. If your thirst for the unknown and the unexplained is still unquenched, I invite you to delve deeper into the abyss of terror. Just beyond the veil of reality, another story awaits to send shivers down your spine. Dare to join me in the next video, where the unknown becomes known and the unseen seen. Until then, keep the lights dim and your mind open. This is Professor Shadow, signing off.